So let's go ahead and get started here. Welcome attendees, and thank you for joining us this evening to learn more about the Landscape and Lighting Maintenance District, also known as LLMD number 7 Rolling Hills. Tonight here, we're have a discussion regarding your LLMD and hear potential funding options. Before we get started, I would like to go over just a few Zoom logistics so that you're able to participate during the presentation and meeting. So just real quickly, a few housekeeping items. We have to keep your microphones muted to avoid any background noise or disruptions during the presentation portion of the meeting. If you have any questions or comments about any of the presentation you hear tonight, then please type those questions and comments by utilizing the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. If you'd like to speak during the interactive question and answer session near the end, please use the raise your hand function or press *6 on your phone to request to speak. If there are any related questions that cannot be addressed, then the team will research and provide a response on the project website. So we've had to make some last-minute adjustments to the program. So first, I'd like to go over our agenda. We'll briefly provide introductions of the city team. Our Public Works Director will provide a few opening remarks. I will go over the services provided by the LLMD. The city attorney will run through the funding options available. We'll review the district budget and assessment levels and provide time at the end for questions. So joining us this evening are David Lim, our acting city attorney, Paul Koschel, our director of public works, Chris Lewis, management analyst 2, Marisa Kumpion, senior management analyst, and representing our operations division, is Gary Sponsler, landscape maintenance supervisor, Richard Vasquez, our landscape maintenance supervisor, and I am Ryan Punganeben, our assistant public works director. So with that, I'll hand it over to Paul, our director of public works.
Thanks, Ryan. Excuse me, and good evening, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us tonight. I wanted to just start us off with a very brief overview of why we're here tonight. In short, it's to share some background and information with you and then get your feedback. So at the December 21st City Council meeting, there was an item on the agenda for the council to consider new landscape maintenance contracts for several districts, including Rolling Hills. Due to maintenance costs exceeding the available revenues, the new contracts included reduced landscape maintenance services to arrive at a balanced budget. We heard from several residents that evening who expressed concern with the proposed reduction of services. To avoid a lapse in landscape maintenance, the City Council ultimately approved the landscape maintenance contracts. However, the council also directed staff to explore funding options that would allow the maintenance to return to the prior level of service. So since then, the City Attorney's Office has worked to develop several options for the City Council's consideration at their next council meeting, which is next Tuesday, February 1st. However, before that council meeting, we wanted to conduct this town hall to share the information with all of you, the residents of the district, and to give you the opportunity to provide input and ask questions. We're engaging with you because we want to include you in this overall process. Now, while it's happening later than it should have, now that we've uncovered the scale of the issue, it's certainly a priority for us to resolve with you. And this is just the first step, first of several engagement points along the way that we'll communicate with you. And so with that, thank you again for spending a part of your evening with us, and I'll hand the mic back over to Ryan.
Thanks, Paul. So I have a couple slides geared and just educational for this one here. What is a landscape and lighting maintenance district? It is an assessment district created by local government agencies pursuant to the Landscaping and Lighting Act of 1972. So LLMDs can fund the installation and annual maintenance of landscaping, public lighting, sidewalks, curbs and gutter, and park or recreational improvements. At the time of its formation, there is a prescribed process that needs to be completed, which includes appropriate planning and assessment engineering. That includes an engineer's report and later a public hearing and a potential protest ballot for affected landowners. A finding of benefit is required. So let's dive in more specifically to the public improvements eligible for maintenance. On this slide, it provides a brief visual of the components currently being maintained within the Rolling Hills district. And this includes maintenance of all streetlights within the public right-of-way, maintenance of all landscaping and median islands and parkway strips along Hilborn Road, Line Road, and Martin Road, as well as the residential streets landscaping between the curb and sidewalk on these residential streets. Also included as part of the maintenance is any city facilities designated open space. So as Paul alluded to already, the focus of our discussion is in regards to the recent reduction in landscape service within the district. And first, I'd like to start out by apologizing for not bringing this to the residents' attention sooner. And for this, we truly are sorry. Our public works team, however, is focused and we are ready to take the next appropriate steps. And this includes identifying a long-term budget and appropriate revenue level for the district. And as many of you already have heard, for nearly the past 2 decades, the assessments have remained the same, and there currently is no built-in automatic inflator. This past year, costs have significantly gone over budget, causing the district to utilize available reserve or fund balance. These cost overruns are mainly attributed to increased utility expenses and contract landscape maintenance. So in an effort to maintain a balanced budget and potentially avoid any future deficits, it was determined to decrease the available budget for landscape maintenance. So there's been quite a few questions since December in regards to what this reduced landscape service would look like. And on this slide, we've tried to articulate the work into 3 categories. So priority level 1 is essential to keep hazards. So for example, down limbs and tree branches blocking lines of sight. So for this reason, this service will still be provided. Conversely, the maintenance contracts have reduced all work included within priority level 3, such as replanting shrubs or trees, irrigation and bark replacement have essentially been eliminated. A key note to point out for the priority level 2 is that fertilization and weed control will not be provided within this reduced contract. So now I'm going to hand it off to David to talk through some of the funding options to augment the current district budget.
Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is David Lim. I'm the acting city attorney, and thank you for letting me be here with you tonight. I'm going to apologize in advance as I go through a summary of Proposition 218 and the existing law regarding Proposition 218 and the funding options. I'm going to be looking off to my right because I have a dual screen. So I'm going to be looking like I'm not looking at you because I'm looking at this screen over here. So let me very briefly give you an overview of the Landscape and Lighting Maintenance District and how it operates, because there was some discussion about it at the December 21st council meeting. There is a complicated rubric of how a Landscape and Lighting Maintenance District is set up, mainly because landscape and lighting maintenance districts were authorized by the state legislature in 1972. And the particular landscape and lighting districts for these districts were formed by the city in 1988, 1989, and 1990 for the various districts in your areas. And they were put in place when the subdivisions were first created to allow for a higher level of landscaping and maintenance for your particular neighborhoods. And that was the intent when they were formed by the state legislature. Prior to 1996, the city council could raise the assessments for districts without any feedback from the community. And that was one of the reasons why you had what has been called, the taxpayer revolt under Proposition 13 in the late 1970s, and Proposition 218, which was designed to close a loophole. Without getting into the gory details of the law, because it gets very complex, basically Proposition 218 that says that for a special assessment district, in order to raise rates, you have to first have an engineer who does a study, and you have to apportion out what are deemed to be special benefits, which are benefits that are deemed to only benefit particular properties. And usually it's the properties within the district. And then you separate those from what are called general benefits. And general benefits are benefits that are deemed to be of a benefit to the entire community. So an example is your roadways or your streetlights on main arterial roads or any public road are deemed to be a general benefit because anybody driving their car benefits from a safe public median and also streetlights. So under Prop 218, you cannot raise rates in landscape and lighting districts without doing an engineer's report. And then if you're going to raise rates, you have to do a notice and an election in the district so that the homeowners have a chance to vote yes or no on whether to raise the assessments. In District 7 for Rolling Hills, there has never been a Prop 218 assessment. The last effort to do one was in 1999, and it was defeated by the homeowners. So it was 23 years ago that happened. In the election, homeowners would get notice of the proposed rate. They would get a ballot in the mail. So it wouldn't be an election during a general election. It would be an election by mail. Each homeowner would get a proportionate vote in relation to the proportion of the special benefit assessed by the engineer. So if the engineer says you have, a 20% special benefit as opposed to your neighbor gets a 10%, you would get your vote would count 20%, your neighbor would get 10%. Okay, I'm not going to dive any deeper than that. It's just to say that you can't raise rates without a 218 assessment. However, and here's the big however, because some of the benefits for a landscape and lighting district are deemed to be a general benefit, there are provisions where the city council can make contributions or a loan to a landscape and lighting district as long as the use is for a general fund contribution. And the city council in 1991, after all these landscape and lighting districts were formed, passed a resolution. It's resolution 91-213B to establish policies to determine what is a general fund contribution. And they basically defined it as any general and administrative expenses for the district, use of interior streetlights, arterial streetlights, and then most importantly, arterial median maintenance. Meaning your median landscaping. Those are deemed to be general fund contributions, which the city council may use general funds to cover the cost if needed. And in fact, one of the sections of the resolution mirrors the Streets and Highways Code, which says that if the district has a deficit, the city council may determine upon a recommendation by the Maintenance District Committee to enter into an agreement to loan money to the district with the stipulation that such money will be paid off with interest based upon the city's cost of funds within a specified term of 3 to 5 years. Now, the legislative code for Streets and Highway Code does not mention a loan, but instead it talks about a temporary advance. But we've determined through our looking at the research and the case law that a loan would appear to be proper given the language of advance in the state legislative code. The resolution also said that the city council at their discretion may just make a contribution to the district from the general fund to cover the cost of providing services. So instead of a loan, the city council could just make a general fund contribution out of the general taxpayer fund to fund general uses general uses within the district. So that's where that language comes from. And that's what we researched after December 21st when the issue came up about how to fund the deficit. The three options that we are considering, and I'm trying to bring up the slide because I don't see it on my screen. Oh, never mind. So I'm going to ask if we can go to slide number 12. We have 3 options, and each option has an option A and an option B. Just so you know, the only difference between options A and B are option A anticipates what we are calling an expedited community engagement process to do a 218 process to try to increase the revenue levels for your district. Option B anticipates a normal or regular community engagement process to do a 218. The only difference being an expedited process could be done in 4 to 6 months, whereas the full community engagement process can take anywhere from 12 to 18 months to do a 218. And staff, Ryan and Christina can talk about that they already are in discussions with consultants to do an expedited 218 process. So with that in mind, if you look at slide number 12, the first option, 1A and 1B, is to ask the council upon a recommendation from the committee to authorize the use of general fund money as a loan from May 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2022. Have the residents or the districts conduct an expedited process to get the funds necessary to pay that loan back. And the details of the loan will be worked out if the council so authorizes by the council if it wants to set that policy. Option 2, which is slide 13, please, would authorize the use of general fund money to fund public improvements, and basically would just be a contribution. So not a loan, but just a one-time contribution from the general fund. Option 3, which is slide 14, would be basically what the council already is doing and did at its December 21st meeting, which is to take no action to supplement the budgets, go through the either expedited or regular 218 process to try to get the necessary funds to bring the district budget back to a point where you get services back to the level that you enjoyed prior to this deficit. Of the 3 options, staff is, we presented to the staff, and staff has determined that option 1A or 1B is the option that they're going to recommend to council, and that is the loan. The reason they're thinking about recommending that to council, or will be recommending it to council, is it allows sort of a stopgap measure. Some funds will be used to fund the district, but the district has a chance to go through the 218 process and pay that money back within the timelines set out by resolution. So it avoids it limits, I should say, the liability or the danger to the city of getting a lawsuit from another district or another neighborhood to say, you're using these general funds for this particular district, this particular neighborhood, and not our neighborhood, and it's taxpayer money. And so it's therefore a gift of public funds, and it's improper. And so we feel this is a nice balance between those dangers and getting all of you, the service levels that you've asked for and that the council has expressed an interest in bringing back up. The reason, and very quickly, and then I'll hand it back over to Ryan and Christina. The reason option 2 is not recommended by staff is, quite frankly, the one-time use of general funds could open a Pandora's box to legal challenges. As I just mentioned, that people would say you're using general fund money for a specific neighborhood and district, and nobody else in the city is getting that benefit, and it could lead to either legal challenges or fights among districts that could have long-lasting consequences beyond this. It also does set a precedent of using general fund money to fund landscaping, and general fund money, as you know, is used for all sorts of things, including public safety, police, and fire. And so while the city has a healthy reserve at the current time, it's very easy to, have 1 or 2 incidents, natural disasters, or something happens where you need to dip into that reserve. And so generally, the recommendation is not to use general funds other than through the normal budget process, unless, as I said, it's a loan. Option 3, I don't think we need to discuss. The council has already indicated that they would like staff to come back with other options. So while this was what the council is currently doing, if you were at the December 21st meeting, you did hear the council asking for additional options, which is why we're here tonight. So with that, sorry for speeding through that. I will turn it back over to Ryan and Christina to finish up.
Thanks, David. So good evening, everybody. My name is Chris Lewis, Management Analyst with Public Works. For this portion of the presentation, we're going to talk about the current assessment rates in Rolling Hills. I'll give you about a 5-year history of the revenues and expenditures that we have had. We'll talk a little bit about the projected revenues and expenditures for the next couple of years and some of the potential changes to the assessment rates and budgets, depending on which option council decides and directs staff to go with on February 1st. But before we dive into all of those details, I just wanted to note, and I'll probably say this a couple times throughout the presentation, the actuals that I'm going to be presenting on from fiscal year 16-17 through 2021, that's accurate information. It's something that's already happened. We have that data and loaded and ready to present to you. However, the projections we have for the rest of this fiscal year 21-22 and 22-23, those projections are based on information that staff has available to us today at this time. And so in order to provide these projections, we had to make several assumptions. There's a lot of moving parts and a lot of variables and a lot of different options that council has to consider at this time. So we tried to take a conservative approach in providing these projections to you. Among these assumptions that we had to make was that the revenues you'll see is based off of little to no delinquent assessments, meaning everybody's paying their assessments on time. Typically throughout the years when we have the delinquencies, we'll catch up in the following years. But for purposes of this projection, we just assume little to no delinquent assessments. We also assume that the special versus general benefit that David touched on, the special benefit being the portion of revenue that residents pay, and the general benefit calculations being the portion of revenues that's received by the general fund, that those calculations are, they'll have little to no change in the engineer's report, again, what David described, provided by our consultant at a later date. So once our consultant goes through that, an engineer can actually provide those calculations to us. We're assuming that there's going to be little to no change. Also, the last major assumption we had to make was that the scope and cost of landscape services in our projections are based on the pre-January 2022 cost and scope of landscape services that we were receiving prior to this reduction in services. So all the projections you're going to see here is based on those costs plus about a 30% inflator. And I know 30% sounds, like rather large, but we do feel that that was necessary given the trends in recent years for these same types of services, the increases we've been seeing year over year. So of course, the actual assessments and budgets and everything we'll end up with in 22-23, for the remainder of the last few months of this year and beyond, of course, will all be dependent on once we receive that engineer's reports, once we get the results of the Prop 218 vote, and once we finalize negotiations with our landscape contractor, we'll have a much better idea of what this actually is. So now that I've said that disclaimer, I can go ahead and jump into this information here. So I'll start by talking about the current assessment rates, which were established for Rolling Hills in the 1990s. The surplus ranch portion of the district is paying $250 per parcel per year. Rolling Hills and all others are paying $300 per parcel per year. We do have a couple commercial parcels in the district that's based off square footage. Neither one of these sections of the district have a CPI annual inflator built into it. So it's been about $300 and $250 for almost 30 years now. And as David mentioned, in 1999, a Proposition 218 vote was put to the property owners to increase these assessments, these ranges, and include a CPI inflator, but that vote was rejected by the property owners. So the current assessment revenue, again, assuming we're receiving all of those revenues, assessment revenues about $315,000 per year. For the past 5 years, expenses have exceeded revenues, anywhere from about $17,000 here in 16-17 to about nearly $250,000 in fiscal year 2021. So this graph you're looking at here, you'll see the revenues is represented by the blue line, which has been pretty steady for the past 5 years, but expenses have been, increasing to its peak there in 2021. So when the reduction in services was presented to council in June of 2021 for the fiscal year 21-22, it was in an attempt to sort of bring those expenses back down, normalize, having our expenses be below our revenues. And we were hoping to even out and have a balanced budget by fiscal year 22-23. Not only did we want to balance our budget, but we also wanted to make sure that we kept our fund balance, or our reserves, at a positive level. So what you're seeing here is just the same revenue and expense data, just in chart form here. But included in this chart, I've also included the net between the two, revenue and expenses, and also the fund balance at the end of each fiscal year, or the reserve that the fund or the district has available to them for any, unexpected repairs and maintenance items and projects and things like that. Just to kind of walk you through how this works, we have the revenues and expenses, obviously. In 16-17, we overspent by about $17,000. And at the end of the year, we had $555,000 available to us. Likewise, in 17-18, overspent by about $82,000, which ate into this $555,000. So we ended up with about $473,000 at the end of the year. That goes on, and you'll see here by fiscal year 2021, due to a negotiation and a new bit of landscape contracts, a new landscape contract, we overspent by about $250,000. So we wanted to make sure these next two fiscal years were really balanced out and really, right sized to make sure that our fund balance stayed in the positive. So if on February 1st, council directs that no loan or contribution should be taken, and the decision made at the December 21st meeting will be maintained, we can expect that the assessments will, of course, be maintained at the same level that they are, and also the reduction in services will be maintained where they are until we can go through that Prop 218 vote, get the new engineer's report, and maybe we'll have an increase in assessments, or maybe we'll continue on with this. So for comparison purposes, I'm just going to go ahead and extract the last three columns, fiscal years 2021 through 22-23. I'll give you a side-by-side comparison of what it looks like with the reduced services compared to what we are projecting it would look like if we were to bring those services back up to the full, what we're referring to as full landscape services. So you can see the impacts of the net, net deficits each year, and you can see the impact on the fund balance as well. What you're looking at on this slide is these three columns just extracted from that chart previously at the reduced service level. And on the right side here, you're seeing what it would look like if we were to bring those services back up for the last couple months of 21-22, back up to the full pre-January 2022 level. So I'm going to walk you through this. Hopefully you can follow along with me here. We ended 2021 with positive $87,000 in our fund balance. But in 21-22, if we bring those services back up and we do the Prop 218 vote, the cost of that included in this expense here, $552,000, we will have a deficit of $208,000 at the end of fiscal year 21-22. Since we had a positive $87,000, our fund balance will actually end up at negative $120,000. So that's the sum of these two numbers right here. If council directs staff to take the normal community engagement process and we extend through 22-23, doing the community engagement and doing the Prop 218 process, then we will of course not have our updated revenues yet, so revenues will stay the same. Again, we will have increased expenses for those full landscape services, and we will end up overspending by about $326,000. So the sum of these two, what we ended at last year, plus the over budget for 22-23, puts us at a total deficit of about $450,000, which is what you're at the end of of 22-23, which is what you're seeing right here. So we would need about $450,000 covered by a loan or contribution to make sure that we can maintain those services, go through the Prop 218 vote, take care of any necessary expenditures. And I put here that it's the minimum of $450,000 because, of course, you know, we want to always have a little bit in our fund balance to make sure we can take care of any unexpected repairs. That $450,000 is just going to bring us, you know, to a just over zero in our fund balance. So that's, you know, that's kind of what we're looking at here. I also want to note that this is plus interest. If it is a loan, if it's a contribution, obviously there's no effect to your assessments, but if it's a loan, this $450,000 will be factored into future assessments. Now that repayment plan is not yet worked out yet. You know, if it's a 2-year repayment plan, a 5-year repayment plan, so it's a little difficult to tell you what your assessments will be because we're not sure how quickly we'll need to pay that back. But I also want to note that if the loan is made in any amount and the Proposition 218 vote fails, or the property owners reject to increase any of the assessments for the amount needed to pay back the loan or to increase services or otherwise, this $450,000 loan or whatever loan amount is made will be taken out of future budgets, which means we'll have to reduce the services even further in order to make those payments back to the general fund. So, you know, that was a lot of information here. And this is, you know, what staff is going to be bringing to council on February 1st. So we will await their decision at that time. I will go ahead and give this back over to Ryan.
So thanks, Chris. And the city understands the visual impacts caused by these reduced level of maintenance. And we're continuing the conversation with the landscape contractor to confirm if there's an ability to start the maintenance work sooner. The scenarios that both David and Chris ran through was looking at if we were to take the services starting in May. And we're looking for opportunity to maybe accelerate that to April or March. We're still exploring that option. However, one of the best ways we can help everyone is to provide up-to-date information about the assessment and this Prop 218 process. So please be sure to sign up for updates on the website, www.civicmike.com/Fairfield. And that's the location to receive surveys and information on future community meetings and next steps in our process. So that concludes our formal presentation. And I have Marisa Kumpion on the call here today, joining us today in the meeting, and she will help facilitate our question and answer section. So Marisa, take it away.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Currently, I only show 2 questions in the Q&A. Please feel free to take a moment now if you have a question to type it in, and I showed 2 in the chat. My preference is that you put all questions in the Q&A that assists us with being able to field questions. The first question is quite long, so I'll read it in parts to allow appropriate staff to respond. Please explain steps and timing as the Civic Mike website indicates that after February 1st, 2022, City Council meeting, the next step is in late 2022.
So as Chris kind of alluded to, we're going to there's 2 scenarios that we're currently looking at, and one is a full public engagement process or this accelerated one. So pending decision on February 1st, if we were to go through this accelerated community engagement process, that we'd be looking at potential ballots and resolutions for intent of a new engineer's report in May or June. That's the time frame that we would be looking at to conduct that. If it was to do the full process, it would be that same time frame, May, June, but it would be in 2023.
Next part of that question, and Vicki, I do see your hand up, but I'll allow you to speak after we finish this question. When will the increase in costs be disclosed?
So the increase in costs will be disclosed once we have a direction from council, and pending their direction, whether or not we're taking out a loan. They will also tell us if they do decide to go with a loan, depending on how much of a loan we can take out, whether it's an up to amount, whether it's to sustain us for 4 months or 2 months, we're just not sure. So we're going to be bringing this to council February 1st, hopefully coming back on March 1st. If council does decide to go with an accelerated process, and by I would say end of March or early April, we would have new assessment rates, at least a better idea of what the assessment rates may be.
When will the mailers for voting be sent to residents?
So as I kind of alluded to in that, depending upon which process we run through with full or accelerated. So the accelerated we would be looking towards May of this year, and then if it was the full, it would be May of 2023.
Is the late 2022 description because you will complete an analysis first to arrive at a cost distribution?
Chris kind of alluded to that. There is a process that we need to do and we're hiring a consultant, NBS, to assist us with looking at the appropriate budget for the maintenance within their district, and then also doing the work necessary to create the new engineers report. So if we go through this accelerated process, we anticipate kicking that work off here in February and having that wrapped up in April.
And Ryan, you may have just addressed this in regards to how you'll be using a firm to assist with this, but the next portion of the question is, will there be a chance to learn results of the analysis and discuss the allocation methods that will be used?
Absolutely. So our intent is to, once we have those new amounts, as Chris has alluded to, and MBS is helping us pull together, we will be coming back to the community with those amounts and those findings. There again, late April, early May.
What special steps does Prop 218 require?
David, would you mind taking that one? What special steps does Prop 218 require?
Sure. So under 218, you have a consultant or you have an engineer. And in this case, it would be, I think, Ryan, I think you're the engineer. Shouldn't have outed Ryan that way, but you have a city engineer who is an expert in doing a 218 analysis. They have to do an analysis of the landscaping district and essentially figure out what is deemed a special benefit versus a general benefit, and then proportion the share of the special benefit among each parcel based on the amount of benefit that they gained from having that special benefit. So it's going to depend on where you are and what the level of service is or what the type of service is. After they do that, they publish the report. They make a recommendation as to the amount to be assessed. The council approves that assessment rate and then authorizes staff or the consultant to mail out the ballot and information. Then there's an information period. The reason, the timing, I think there's going to be a question as to what's the difference between the expedited process versus the normal process. I think that's the next question that I'm looking at. There's certain timing mechanisms. So you have to allow, and I don't have the memorized off the top of my head, so I apologize. Don't take my what I'm saying here as gospel. But so, for example, after you send out the first notice to residents, you have to have 45 days before you can send out the ballot. And then after you send out the ballot, you have to give people a period of time. I think it's something like 30 days or another 45 days to return the ballot with either a positive or negative vote to the city. And then you have to schedule a public meeting with a public hearing where the public has a right to come and be heard. They have one last chance to object or to vote, and then the ballots are open and tabulated and the results are made. So the difference between the expedited versus the normal process is in the normal process, you build in a lot of cushion. right? You go beyond what's statutorily required so that you can have more chance for input. You can have community meetings with an expedited process based on the feedback that the council heard from residents on December 21st and the desire to possibly, do something to get the funding back to a level. The council may decide, okay, let's go with an expedited process. Doesn't mean that the communities are going to be heard. It just means that the timelines are going to be compacted, so there's not going to be a lot of wiggle room to get things done. In essence, it means staff is going to work a lot harder for you all to make sure that you get the information that you need in the time required in order to make sure everything goes smoothly. So I hope that answers the questions.
Thank you. I'm going to move over to Vicki, who has her hand up. One moment, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. I, of course, live in the Rolling Hills area. And since I heard much information tonight, my one question, or one of my many questions, is since there is a healthy reserve, which you spoke of, is there any chance that some of that healthy reserve would help to get this expedited? I mean, we purchased these homes in this area because it's a beautiful area, and the maintenance that was we were entitled to paying those taxes. Of course, I'm disappointed as a homeowner that it's come to us so late. Now visiting all of you, I see it's coming to fruition, but in the interim, our landscaping looks terrible, because we missed the maintenance that was even minimal at that point. So I'm just curious if this healthy reserve that you speak of will have any impact on getting this expedited faster, so that we don't have 6 months to a year of irrigation problems, leaks that cause mudslides. Even this last wind, big branches that are all in the street continuing. So again, many concerns as a homeowner. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Vicki. I believe I remember during David's presentation, he did talk about that currently the city, or the general fund, has a healthy reserve, which is, of course, will be up to city council on whether or not they'd like to allocate those funds away from other services such as public safety or other services that they provide to the city to the districts. So of course that will be city council's decision. But as far as the reserve in the district, at the end of 2021, the district itself only had about $90,000 available for unexpected repairs. However, just with the way we had to budget and how we were paring down paring down landscape services so heavily in 21-22, we were actually soaking up about $70,000 or $75,000 of those reserves. So we're left at the end of this year, even with the reduction of services, at the end of fiscal year 21-22, with only about $10,000 available to the district. So two different pots of money. One is the district, which of course we've already taken action to try to prevent from dipping below zero. And then the other pot of money being the general fund. City council has, they'll be making their decision, on February 1st.
Okay, we have our next question. Staff may have already addressed this, but I'll read it for the record. What was the source of the cost jumping in 2020 to 2021?
In 2020, there was a new bid for landscape services. The previous contract expired, and so staff did go out for new services. And even from staff estimates, I think there was something like all the bids came back at least 50% or around 50% more than expected. So that's the reason for that jump.
What is special benefit to interior parcels from Hilborn? Is there a separate landscape contract for the Hilborn Road median?
No, and Richard, I see you shaking your head, so I was going to ask you to correct me if I'm wrong, but Hillborn Road is being taken care of by the contract that's servicing LLMD number 7. As far as the specific special benefit to the interior homes, I don't have that information in front of me, but certainly the new engineer's report will address that and will define that percentage explicitly.
Why do the landscapers clean interior streets of rubbish when we pay Republic Services to sweep those same streets?
So I believe the question's in regards to street sweeping. So the leaf removal is included as part of the contract that we have. We had to, with this current scope of work, we did have to reduce the frequency of the leaf removal and leaf cleanup. But that leaf, if that's what the question is referring to, we do have New Image to do that scope of work for us.
Ryan, I think the question might be, because I believe the landscape maintenance contracts include like paper pickup rubbish that they see in the landscaped areas. Is that correct, Richard or Gary?
Is correct, along with, the gutter, what's up to it.
Right, and so I think that's the question, is it is part of that contract, but then also when Republic does street sweeping, they come in and obviously sweep the streets and the gutters along there too. So is there a little bit of overlap potentially?
When did the landscape contractor change? How much did the contracted amount go up or down as a result of the new contractor?
Well, the contractor changed January 1st of 2022 is when New Image took over. And Chris, do you have the exact dollar amounts or the exact contract amounts?
I do not at this time. We'll have to answer that one on the when we post the Q&A on the website.
Why is the revenue from cattle grazing not credited towards Prop 218 assessment?
I'm not entirely familiar with the cattle grazing revenue, so I'd have to also research that one and get back to you.
Prior to the operating deficit in fiscal year 16, on average, how much was added to the annual surplus each year?
I'll have to get back to that question as well. I don't have that information in front of me.
What services are we going to lose and when? Are they going to dump trash at the park daily, Rolling Hills Park?
So the levels of service were reduced on January 1st. The Rolling Hills Park is separate from the LLMD. The Rolling Hills Park is under the Neighborhood Parks contract, which is paid by general fund. So the services that were reduced were fertilizer, pesticide applications, things like that. So that's a short sample of the services that were reduced.
What is the landscape district charge for any city employee work in the district? How much? Why is there a charge for city workers to oversee the landscape work?
So that charge is for Richard and his team in our operations division to oversee our landscape contractors and make sure they're adhering to the terms of the contract that's set by city staff. Any other city employees that are being charged to the landscape district are myself and Ryan with direct charges. But these charges between us here in engineering and in the operations division, I believe it's between 2% and 6% each person. There are 16 landscape districts, and we also have a significant portion of our time being charged to the department or other funds. So it's I don't want to say minimal. It's just not a lot. It's not like 50% of our salaries or anything like that.
Please restate the cap on revenue as stated, but there have been many increases of per and actual charges within the cap. I think they mean per annual. The cap has been 300. not the per am charges over the years. I'm not really clear on that question. I'm wondering if David, the person who posed the question, would like to be unmuted and like to ask the question live. David, is that an option for you? And while you're considering that, I'm going to go on to the next question. Is it possible to do a one-time catch-up assessment to fix the current deficit, but not carry the catch-up amount forward to all future years?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, David, would you mind? Do you want to go ahead and take that? I know that has to do with the Prop 218 vote. I was going to actually just defer it to you anyway. I was going to say, I think it's part of the intent.
Oh, great. Christina's got this.
No, go ahead.
So if I understand the question properly, I think the question is asking, can you have the assessment be a higher amount to catch up the deficit and then have it reduced to the levels that you want to have it to move forward? And the short answer is sort of. What you can do is you can pass, and Christina, you may want to correct me, or Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, but you can pass an assessment that gives you a range, a buffer to add costs or lower costs, which we currently don't have right now. I think we're bumped up at the maximum level right now, and that's part of the problem. So what you could do is you could have an assessment that allows you to have a range for the city to work with within a certain range. And I know that there's some rules about how you assess that range and what the range can be, and it has to be capped at a certain level. It gets very complex, but the short answer is yes, using that range within the assessment. And that also keeps you from having to, do a 218 process like every year, right? Because to cover things like inflation, additional landscape maintenance costs, things like that.
Great, thank you. And thank you, attendee David, for raising your hand. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you now, please. Thank you.
Yes, the question or the actual restatement is the way that the charts were labeled. It showed that the cost to the individual parcels has been and continues to be $300. That's incorrect, actually. There have been many raises over the years. The cap has always been $300 as set back when the 218 was first set years ago. But the rates have gone up, and the people that haven't looked at their tax bill wouldn't know that, but the rates have gone up continuously over the years, and they've been capped at 300, and that's the difference. The other question was on the street sweeping and the landscape district. If you have the street sweepers and the landscapers duplicating work, and we're paying our trash rates that include street sweeping, including what is called the leaf season. So we're recognizing that the trash company is responsible for increased street sweeping during leaf season. And then we're sending our landscapers out to do that same work. There's a savings that could be handled immediately. Then the other question I had was on the special benefits.
David, I apologize. May I ask you to just pause so we can allow staff to answer the primary question? We have ample time to get to all of them. So if we could just.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Chris, do you want to take that first question?
Yes, the first question about the cap of the assessments. You're absolutely correct, David. The range or the maximum allowable to be charged to the Rolling Hills zone and the Surface Ranch zone was capped at $300 and $250 each zone. And I don't know exactly when we actually maxed out that range. I want to say actually for the Surface Ranch, it was last year. We went from $212 to the max of $250. But as far as the Rolling Hills zone, I'm not exactly sure what year it was that we capped out at $300. So thank you for that clarification. My slide was meant to indicate the current assessment rates, but that is absolutely correct. That's the max in the range.
And David, in response to your second comment, I think that's more of a comment for staff to take into consideration as we're evaluating this. So then we can move on to the third question, which I think was directed towards our city attorney. Please go ahead.
On the special benefits?
I believe so, yes. I see it typed in here in the, no, actually, I believe you typed it in here regarding the city allocation to any one area of the city in terms of a gift of public funds.
Oh, yes, that hasn't been covered yet. That was for David Lim, because he stated that if the city were to allocate funds to this area specifically, that he considered that might be a legal question of a gift of public funds. And I take exception to that, because the city has wide berth of where they place their money and funds, especially given the fact that the people in Rolling Hills have very high property tax assessments, and the city gets a large portion of all of our property tax dollars. So it seems a bit of a double dip to not want to cover the landscaping in this area. It seems like we're already all in and fully paid for it. And it appears that the approach here that is being taken to get a Prop 18 ballot at issue, which is really what we're moving towards, is getting a Prop 18 ballot, is a raising of taxes. And so that was the reason for that question. The gift of public funds would be a huge stretch, I think. Wouldn't you agree, David Lim?
No, actually, the law's fairly settled on that. You know, the difference between a general fund tax and a special tax, I will admit, does get pretty complex, but the Supreme Court has done a lot of work, not the Supreme Court, the California courts, both the appellate courts and the Supreme Courts, have had a lot of rulings to try to unwind, you know, what the voters meant when they passed Prop 13 and then Proposition 218. And then there's been cleanup language in the legislature. And, you know, I don't want to get into a long dissertation of taxes and what's a special tax, general tax, but just to say that the reason why money that people pay for property taxes is general fund money is it's a portion based on a proportion of the value of your home. So everyone pays an equal, and I don't want to get into the debate, because that's really kind of going a little bit further than what we're talking about with landscaping districts. We're now talking about, you know, is it a tax or isn't a tax? And I think the law is fairly settled. So I'll just say that, you know, property taxes are property taxes. The law says that those go into the general fund. And you know, I'm not the Supreme Court. They have said what they say it is. And a gift of public funds is when you take money from the general fund and give it to one specific person or one homeowner to the benefit of everybody else. So if we were to give money to have just one street sweeper for one block, that would be considered a gift of public funds. And that's the most simplest analogy that I can make. But again, I don't want to get too bogged down into a debate of is it special, is it general. The law is fairly settled in the process that needs to be taken here. You know, quite honestly, when the council asked us for direction on this, we are looking for creative solutions. The loan option that staff is going to recommend, even that is, you know, it is allowed under the law, but it isn't a standard practice and a best practice for landscape and lighting maintenance districts.
Then the only question I have that remaining, and I think it's your toughest question, is how Hillborn Road is a special benefit to the interior subdivision when there is absolutely, well, there is not one parcel privately owned that faces Hillborn Road, except for below the canal area, which is not part of the district. So I think that the special benefit that is a provision of PA 218 is not being met with the allocation of money under P18 for Hillborn. Now you made the point of the median being separated out. And what I'm saying is that Hillborn Road is now a freeway bypass. It is of no special benefit to any parcel in the landscape district. And if you take the maintenance of that area of Hillborn Road out of this equation, then I think that the people of this area are actually paying too much at $300 per year. That's all I have.
Thank you, David. We appreciate your.
Thank you. I'll go to unmute again. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you. So I see a couple of questions coming up in the chat function. So I'm going to go ahead and address those because I don't want to be a stickler. I know technology can be challenging sometimes. So let me go ahead and jump to the one that I think has not been asked yet. How many residents must return ballots in order for the 218 process to be valid?
You know, I'm actually drawing a blank on that. I know I looked at it, but Ryan, do you know that answer off the top of your head? We can move to the next question and let me check my notes real quick.
How often does the landscaping contract come up for renewal?
That depends on how the contract is written. I think the standard for the city has been to let the contract on a 2-year first initial term with the option to renew the term, with the option to renew the contract with the same terms and conditions for, 2 to maybe even 4 additional terms. So a total of maybe, 8 years or 10 years, between 6 and 10 years, I would say. But it really just depends. At the end of those terms, either the city or the contractor has the ability to, or the rights to not renew the contract or rebid the contract at a higher rate.
And I believe it maybe should say, how is the city going to prevent this from happening again?
Go ahead.
Yeah, maybe I'll take that one. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so the team that we have in place that you see here tonight, as well as the consultant that the team mentioned earlier, NBS, we're going to work towards creating a solution that this doesn't happen again. That's part of the main goal here. One of the things that they're going to be looking at is, as they're looking to establish the rates, is to provide the option for an inflator, so that each year, as costs and for labor and materials and the work continues to increase, the assessments can increase along with it. And that's part of the problem and part of the challenge that we've seen here in Rolling Hills, as well as other districts that don't have an inflator. So that's part of the issue. And now that we just have the right staff here on board now that can monitor the maintenance contracts and the work that's happening.
I have this question that came in after 6:30, so it's fairly recent. It says, please explain a loan process again and the impact on the Rolling Hills homeowners.
And sorry, before we answer that question, I can come back to the question of how many votes it takes. It requires a majority of votes from the property owners to return ballots, with the ballots being weighed according to the individual assessments. So I talked about the proportionality of the votes based on the proportion of the special benefit. So it requires a majority vote of those who return their ballots. Sorry, thank you.
So I'll repeat the question. Please explain the loan process again and the impact on the Rolling Hills homeowners.
Well, the loan process is I think it's, pretty straightforward. Depending on council's decision, will, if they decide to go the loan route, the general fund will either loan a certain amount of money to finish out the fiscal year 21-22 and take us through June 30th of this year. And if they decide to go with the expedited community engagement process, we will hopefully have our new assessment rates established for fiscal year 22-23. And any loan amount that was taken out in 21-22 may be added to, a one-time cost to be paid back in the following fiscal year. Council may approve like a 5-year or a 2-year repayment plan. So it's a little tough to say exactly how the assessments will be affected the following fiscal year. And likewise, if the council decides to go with the full community engagement process that takes us through fiscal year 22-23, any loan that is loaned to the district in that year again, depending on the payment process or the repayment plan, will either be paid back the following fiscal year, or most likely, given the amount of deficit we have here, will probably be, a 2 to 5 or 3 to 5 year repayment process.
Thank you. So we have one more question. It's a two-parter, but I'll ask the attendees, if you do have a question and you're interested in addressing the panel, please feel free to raise your hand. We do want to hear from you. You're also welcome to go ahead and type your question into preferably the Q&A area or the chat function, if that's helpful. Thank you. When does the contract with the current landscape contractor expire?
December of 2023.
Is there a plan to rebid that contract as a part of this process? It would be helpful to know how many bidders there were when the contract was last bid and how much variation there was among the bidders.
Yes, there is a plan to rebid this contract should council direct staff to go with any option that increases the level of service we currently have. Also, if we go through this Prop 218 process and it is determined that the property owners do favor an increase in assessments, then of course we will also rebid at that time, looking forward to beyond December of 2023 to get those services back up to their full level or whatever level we can support given the approved assessment amount. And sorry, there was a part to that question, second part to that question. Oh, how many bidders there were when this contract was last bid? There were 3 bidders. The variation was we had two bidders that were around the 90,000. Or excuse me, I'm sorry. We had several bids going on at this time. I can't remember. Richard, maybe do you know if Dominguez actually bid on this one, or did they? You're on mute.
No, not on the current contract with the reduced services.
Yeah.
The previous contract where the expenses really went up. There were, I think 3 bidders, and I can't remember what the differences were in the previous one with full services.
Yeah, we solicited for our 3 most qualified contractors, and I think in this instance 2 declined. Right? They said, thank you, but this actually, for their operations, it didn't financially or operationally, make sense for their companies.
There was a new question that just came through, and I believe it has been addressed, but it's being asked again, so we should revisit it. So effective January 1st, 2022, we have a new landscaper and reduced services. If so, what services are no longer in play? And Richard, I know you touched on this, but can you revisit that, please?
Yeah, so we did have a reduced service contract start January 1st, and the reductions were the frequency of some of the services, so as far as cleaning out the planter beds in front of the houses, elimination of fertilization for the turf and planter areas, as well as herbicide applications, and then, like I said, reduced services. That's a small sample of some of the services that were reduced.
Next question. The actual level of services began to decline long before the periods you have discussed. The bark has not been replaced or any replacement plans installed for at least 10 years. Is there a plan to actually get back to a higher level of service?
So one of the things we want to do as part of this community engagement process is to get input on that type of what would the community like to see, so that we as a as the contract manager, if we could do something to that end. So Chris and I intend on engaging with NBS to do some of these focus surveys about some of the things you would like to see within your district, and I think that's part of the process that we're going to be going through, and as it pertains to some of the past practices. I'll let Richard chime in on that. but I know that those are capital expenses, and we try to hone in on that as we have a project. I believe that's been our past practice. Is that correct, Richard?
It is, but in the past contracts, we did also have seasonal plant replacement and bark replacement. So I'm not sure of your exact location, but over the years, continuously, at least twice a year, bark was added to different areas, and there were areas that were replanted. So again, I'm not sure exactly what the specific area is that they haven't seen.
I don't show any further questions. I do show 2 comments that might be helpful to address. One comment is essentially, so either way, homeowners' costs will increase.
No, not necessarily. In any option that council chooses or directs staff to proceed with, it was the intent to go through with a Prop 218 process to get the homeowners' feedback and understand if they would like to increase their services, and by doing so, increasing their assessments. However, if we go through that process and it is rejected by the homeowners and the Prop 218 vote fails, then no, the range max will stay as it is. And as the years go by and its costs continue to increase, what will happen is obviously we'll see a decrease in services because the current level of revenue will no longer be able to support those increased costs.
And the other comment, oh, go ahead.
And Christina, I should also add, in addition to what Christina said, the council could decide to take no action and leave it as status quo, which is current funded levels with reduced services. There's no guarantee. It's up to the council, obviously, but they could decide we don't want to do option 1 or 2, and we'll go with option 3. Another option, although it's not on the table and not up for discussion, but being a lawyer, I'd like to be thorough to answer the question. The city council or could always vote to disband the district and then just have regular maintenance levels commensurate with what other parts of the cities have that do not have a landscape and lighting maintenance district.
Hi, Vicki, I see your hand. Give me 1 minute to make this other comment, and then I'll visit you again. The other comment kind of speaks to the desire to have more notification before meetings. So if attendees would like to go ahead and maybe offer some suggestions in the chat box in terms of, is it 2 week, 1 week, what type of notification are you looking for in order to assist with participation levels here in meetings? So I'll pose that question and then I'll jump over to Vicki. I'm gonna go ahead and unmute you. Or actually, can you raise your hand so that I can allow you to talk? And while I'm waiting for that, I think I have one more message here at the bottom. I appreciate Richard's answer on the decreased services. However, it wasn't an exhaustive list. Is there a list of the loss of services or what the decreased services are?
Yes, there is a list. We have a broken down spreadsheet that goes almost line item by line item, and we will have that posted to the MBS Civic Mike website. We'll have that up.
Okay, Vicki, if you'd like to unmute yourself, you have the floor. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on to a couple of other questions that have come in. The reference to 10 years was specific to our property at 3525 Fieldcrest Avenue and the 2 to 3 houses on either side of us. I have lived at this property for 31 years and know that it has been a long time since the level of services was adequate.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the address again once again, and then I can.
Yes, 3525 Fieldcrest Avenue. And the 2 to 3 houses on either side.
And I will look into that.
Thank you. And then please restate when and where answers to questions will be posted.
So following tonight's meeting, we'll have a meeting summary along with this presentation here posted, the recording on our Civic. Thanks, Chris. That was good timing. On our Civic Mike website. So Chris pulled it up there, www.civicmike.com/Fairfield. So we'll have that information posted there.
Thank you. And I see that Roxanne would like to talk. I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute, Roxanne.
Hi, Roxanne Bradley, and I've been a homeowner for 28 years here in the Rolling Hills area. And like some previous homeowners have said, we bought particularly for this area and how beautiful it is. And as previous owners have said, we have slowly seen the decline in the services that have been rendered. Recognizing that it appears that you guys are a newly formed team to address this issue, you have a big task at hand. And we've talked about the communication getting out. It shouldn't have been a notice getting put in like flyer mail, because most people don't read that. I checked with 3 of my neighbors near me. They were not even aware of it. I know that they probably got the flyer just like I did, but you know, they're going to work every day. I'm retired. You have to improve your communication skills in getting this information out and put yourself in the place if you were the one who was going to be impacted, not knowing where you guys live. You have inside information, but we're now getting this, and now we're being told this is going to happen to you, and if there's going to be additional cost associated to your taxes. And we pay, when I came into this area, based on the size of your home, we had to pay $1.50 per square foot on top of the regular taxes that go into this area. And then it took, 10 years to get the school built. So I want to just impress upon you the urgency behind this, the sensitivity behind this. The economy, as you know, everybody's being impacted by it, from just buying household goods and food for our families. And then to come in now and tell us as homeowners in this area, on top of that, you more than likely, regardless of what the young lady said, there is going to be some type of assessment. Please take your work very, very seriously. We're paying for it, and we shouldn't have to pay for it in this fashion. Thank you. More of a comment than a question.
Roxanne, may I ask, can you give us some preferred options in terms of how to best connect?
You will. Hopefully you have, as homeowners, you have access to email. You should not have sent out you need to be sending out that flyer. If you're going to send out that little nice card flyer that you sent out, it has to come out way far in advance than what it did, and multiple times. You should send out notices far in advance. I think there's an Elaine in our area that goes through the Rolling Hills network. She gets information out to us about what's going on in our community, using those as networks to get people out and aware. And those people who attend, such as myself, and participate can get it out to neighbors and letting them know. But it shouldn't have been, it was like a blind side. And almost unfortunate, I feel like I've been hogtied in this, and that this ball has started rolling, and we got to let them know about it. That's the way I feel. But I am the one, my husband and I are the ones who are going to have to pay for it. Because we want our community to stand up and be more pristine than what it currently is. And I'm not just talking about the decline effective January 1. I'm talking what we saw last year and the year. And that's what's hard for me, is when I say here, expenses went up, but when we walked around in this community, I don't see justification. I saw overgrowth in bushes where this weed was just taking over bushes. So if you need to get a communication strategist on your team, get your communication strategist. That's what they focus on. I don't know if that's Civic Mike, but Civic Mike is only one mechanism, and that's for people who have access to email.
Thank you so much for your feedback. We really appreciate it. Next question. Here's another comment that's helpful. Essentially, that we could use Nextdoor as a tool for communicating. Thank you for that feedback, Nikki. I have a question here from Sam. We do have a number of neighborhood watch groups in the Rolling Hills, and the person just mentioned is overall chair of all those groups. Please consider using that communication in this process. We will, Sam. Thank you so much for that feedback. At this time, I don't show any more questions. We do have a hard stop at 7 p.m. We want to make sure that we give everyone the opportunity that would like to address the city, the opportunity to do so. So please go ahead and type in any last minute questions or raise your hands, and I'll give it a minute or so.
I think with that, folks, I think we can, I see another comment, perhaps consider National Night Out Captains for Communication Process. Thank you for that feedback. I think I'll just wrap us up here this evening. Thanks again so much, everybody, for joining us and for all of your feedback. And then just to let you know as well, regarding the Elaine's contact information and the Rolling Hills Neighborhood Network. We do have that contact information. We did send out the card there, although we can on future communications work towards sending out communication as early as possible and improve upon that. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us tonight. Please stay tuned. We'll be communicating more as this process moves forward. Join the council meeting virtually next Tuesday if you wish. And then either way, we'll be communicating the council's decision out to you going forward. So that's it, and good night, everyone.